Can you take me with you? Julian Vale had one hand on the open trunk of his car and the other around a travel mug gone lukewarm in the rain. For a second, he thought Mara Ellison was speaking to someone behind him. Then a silver heel slid from the side pocket of her battered suitcase and struck the wet curb with a small, humiliating clatter. She stood beneath the awning of their Brooklyn building in a black silk dress meant for champagne and photographs, not a one-in-the-morning sidewalk. Her dark hair had come loose from whatever elegant arrangement it had started in, and one side of her mascara had softened beneath her eye. Not enough to make her look ruined. Just enough to make it obvious she had been trying very hard not to be. Julian bent, picked up the shoe, and tucked it carefully back into the suitcase. I was planning on 4 days alone, he said. Mara swallowed. I know. You're not even dressed for weather. I know that too. He looked at the car behind him, one duffel bag, one folded coat, a road atlas he had not needed but liked having, and enough coffee to survive a small national emergency. At 2 in the morning, he had intended to drive north, cross the border by breakfast, and spend 4 days in Montreal pretending that a job offer from Los Angeles could not find him there. Mara stood in the rain with her suitcase handle clenched in one hand. Give me a better reason than, I don't want to stay here, he said gently. Her face changed at that. Not collapsing. Tightening. I don't want to go upstairs, she said. I don't want to walk into that apartment and act like tonight didn't happen. The rain ticked against the black hood of his car. Julian held her gaze for another breath, then reached past her and opened the passenger door. Then don't pretend. 3 hours earlier, Mara had been standing in a hallway outside a private dining room in Chelsea, watching her boyfriend explain the future to her as though it were a presentation he had already rehearsed. Andrew Mercer had always been good at sounding calm when other people were panicking. It was one of the reasons she had loved him. He had a way of tilting his head, lowering his voice, putting a hand lightly over her wrist, as though any difficult moment could be made manageable if he could just arrange the words correctly. Inside the dining room, their friends were gathering for Olivia and Mark's engagement party. Someone had already opened the Prosecco. The muffled rise and fall of laughter came through the closed door. Andrew had stepped into the hallway with her after taking a call from his sister. Mara, he said, I think we need to give each other a little space. At first, she had smiled because she thought he was joking. Then she saw the strain in his eyes. What does that mean? It means we've both been under pressure. I don't think I've been under pressure, she said. I think I've been living with you. That's not fair. No, she said quietly. It's not. He exhaled, patient already. Patient in a way that made her feel childish for being hurt. I'm not saying I want to end things. I'm saying maybe we've been forcing the next steps because everyone expects us to. Next steps, Mara repeated. He nodded. The lease. My mother's dinner next month. The conversation about Boston. We don't have to decide everything right now. Her chest had gone cold. But you already decided the lease, she said. You sent me the renewal link yesterday. I thought it would make things easier. For who? Andrew looked away for half a second. For us. It was always us. Even when it meant him. She had stared at him in the dim hallway, at the soft blue tie he had chosen because she liked it, at the familiar line of his mouth, at the man who had remembered every birthday and every coffee order and yet somehow kept making decisions that left no room for her answer. You want space, she said. But you still expect me to come home. I expect us to talk when we're calmer. And sign the lease. Mara. Do you hear yourself? He reached for her hand. Please don't turn this into something bigger than it is. That was the sentence that did it. Not because it was cruel. It wasn't. Andrew had never been cruel in the clean, obvious way that made leaving simple. But suddenly she saw all the small moments that had led there, the time he had told her not to apply for a fellowship in Chicago because it would complicate their plans, the time he had answered his mother's question about children before Mara had opened her mouth, the way he called her hesitation anxiety, as though uncertainty was a defect rather than a signal. She had pulled her hand away. Then Olivia had opened the door and called, "Are you two coming? We need Mara for photos." Andrew had given her a look that meant later. Mara had smiled for the pictures. She had held a champagne flute she did not drink from. She had watched Olivia's fiancé slide a ring onto Olivia's finger while everyone cheered, and she had felt something inside her go very still. By midnight, she had gone home only long enough to throw clothes into an old suitcase. Not practical clothes. The first things she found, jeans, a sweater, a toothbrush, a paperback novel she had already read twice, an extra phone charger. She had not taken Andrew's spare key off her ring. She had not left a note. She had only known she could not be inside that apartment when morning came. And then, through the wet glass doors of the lobby, she had seen Julian's car. Julian, from 5B. Julian, who held the elevator when her arms were full of groceries. Julian, who always wore coats that looked too expensive to be casual but somehow casual anyway. Julian, who once spent 10 minutes crouched beside a nervous rescue dog in the lobby until the dog decided he was safe. Julian, who had smiled at her countless times over the past year and never once tried to make their small conversations mean more than they did. Now he was standing in the rain with his trunk open, looking at her as though he could see exactly how close she was to breaking and had decided not to make a spectacle of it. She got into the passenger seat. The car smelled faintly of leather, cedar, and coffee. A jazz station played low through the speakers. Her suitcase thudded into the back seat, and Julian closed the trunk without asking whether she had packed enough. When he slid into the driver's seat, Mara looked at him. "You don't know where I'm going." Julian adjusted the mirror. "Neither do you. I could be a terrible decision." He started the engine. "Tonight, New York looks like one too." Despite everything, a laugh escaped her. It was small and cracked at the edges, but it was still a laugh. Julian pulled away from the curb. The city slid past them in blurred red lights and rain-dark windows. Mara watched the familiar blocks of Brooklyn disappear behind them and expected panic to rise in her throat. Instead, there was only the strange, terrifying lightness of movement. They crossed the bridge in silence. At 4 a.m, they pulled into a highway diner just north of Albany. The sign outside buzzed red against the wet dark, "Open 24 hours." Mara followed Julian inside in her black dress and borrowed dignity. He had changed nothing about himself except loosening his collar, and he looked like a man who had left a business dinner late, not like someone who had collected a neighbor from a rain-soaked sidewalk and driven her toward another country. The diner smelled like coffee, bacon, and warm vinyl. A waitress with silver hair and a name tag that read Lucy looked them over with amused suspicion. "Long night?" she asked. Julian glanced at Mara. "Almost a wedding," he said. Mara's eyes flicked to him. Lucy smiled. "You two run away from one." "Just in time," Julian said. Lucy laughed and led them to a booth. Mara slid into the seat across from him. Her knees felt unsteady under the table. Julian pushed the coffee pot toward her and poured without asking. Her phone lit up beside the sugar packets. "Andrew, are you home?" A second message appeared before she could turn it over. "We can talk tomorrow. Please don't make a decision tonight." Her fingers went cold. Julian noticed the screen only because it glowed between them. He did not lean forward. He did not ask who it was. He just slid the coffee toward her. "It's hot," he said. "You don't have to answer anyone before it cools." Mara looked at him. There was no judgment in his face. No invitation to tell him everything. Just space. She turned the phone face down. "What are the rules?" she asked. Julian lifted one brow. "For this trip?" You seem like the kind of person who has rules. I'm offended by how accurate that is. I'm fragile. Be kind. His smile softened. All right. 3 rules. Mara wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. First, he said, we don't ask each other why we're leaving unless the other person wants to say. That sounds suspiciously convenient. It's a road trip, not a deposition. Fine. Second, either one of us can turn around at any time. No explanation required. She nodded slowly. And third, he continued, the first person to bring up an X pays for the next tank of gas. Mara stared at him. That's your third rule. It's a financial deterrent. For the first time since the hallway outside Olivia's party, she smiled without forcing it. The waitress came back with their food. Julian ordered pancakes and eggs. Mara ordered fries because she could not imagine eating anything else. They ate in the blue-white diner light while trucks rumbled past outside. For a while, they spoke only about insignificant things, how terrible the diner's playlist was, whether people genuinely enjoyed syrup that came in plastic packets, why every highway rest stop smelled faintly of wet carpet. It was easy in a way that made Mara nervous. Then she said, Andrew. Julian looked toward the gas station across the road. Mara closed her eyes. You're unbelievable. That's a full tank, he said. Maybe premium. She laughed again, and this time it stayed with her. By morning, the rain had weakened to a gray mist. Mara had kicked off her heels sometime before sunrise and tucked her bare feet beneath her on the passenger seat. They stopped at a gas station outside Burlington. The air was cold enough to sharpen her lungs. Julian stood by the pump while Mara swiped her card. You don't have to, he said. I said his name. You did. But I didn't realize you were taking the penalty structure this seriously. I have principles. You packed for Canada in a silk dress. I have selective principles. Julian leaned against the side of the car and watched her with a look that made her feel suddenly too visible. His phone sat on the console inside, screen dark. She noticed a folded road map in the door pocket, 2 pairs of sunglasses, a travel-size bottle of aspirin, and a packet of sugar-free peppermint gum. Her favorite kind. She had once mentioned it in the elevator after complaining that every other mint tasted like toothpaste. You always carry those? She asked, nodding toward the gum. Julian glanced inside the car. Usually. Do you bring people on these drives often? He looked at her then. The gas pump clicked off between them. No, he said. I usually don't bring people. Something in his voice made the question feel larger than it had been. Mara handed him a piece of gum. Their fingers touched. It should have been nothing. A brief brush of skin. But neither of them moved immediately. A truck horn sounded somewhere behind them. Julian looked away first, smiling faintly as he opened the driver's door. We should keep going, he said. Otherwise this trip is going to develop a very suspicious amount of emotional depth at a gas station. Mara climbed in beside him, heat rising to her face. They drove through Vermont under a sky slowly tearing open into pale strips of blue. The landscape softened around them, wet fields, bare branches, low hills still holding the last cold breath of spring. Mara's phone rang just after noon. Andrew. She stared at the name until it stopped. A voicemail appeared. She did not want to listen. She listened anyway. His voice filled the car, low and careful. Mara, I know I handled last night badly. I'm sorry. I don't want you making a huge decision while you're hurt. The lease needs both of us by Monday. We should talk before then. You shouldn't have to figure this out alone. Her throat tightened. Julian did not look at her. He always says that, she murmured. What? That I don't have to figure things out alone. Julian waited. It sounds kind, she said. It probably is kind. But somehow it always means he's already figured it out for both of us. The highway opened ahead of them. Julian tapped the steering wheel once, then pointed to an exit sign in the distance. "There's a train station in the next town," he said. "I can take you there if you want to go back." Mara turned to him. He kept his eyes on the road. "I'm not trying to send you away," he added. "I'm saying you get to decide whether today is a day you leave or a day you keep driving." Her chest hurt with the effort of not crying. For years, people had offered her options that were shaped like instructions. Julian had offered her a door and stepped out of the way. "I don't want to go back yet," she said. His hand tightened once around the wheel. "Okay. I want one more day. Then we'll take one more day." He changed the route without comment. By late afternoon, they arrived at a small lakeside inn in Vermont, its dark wood siding warm beneath the lowering sun. Mist hung over the lake. A stone chimney breathed out a thin ribbon of smoke. Inside, a young man behind the desk glanced at their reservation, then at them. "Mr. Vale?" he said. "We have your lake suite ready." Julian nodded. The clerk smiled brightly. "Congratulations. The champagne is already in the room." Mara blinked. "The what?" The clerk pushed a key card across the counter. A small white card rested beside it. "Welcome, lovebirds." Julian picked it up and read it. Then he looked at Mara. The air between them changed. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But suddenly the lobby's fireplace seemed too warm, the clerk's smile too expectant, the suitcase at Mara's side too intimate. They went upstairs anyway. The suite had one bed. One large bed. A fireplace glowed at the far wall. Champagne chilled in a silver bucket. The lake beyond the windows had gone dark blue beneath the evening sky. Mara stood just inside the doorway, unable to decide whether to laugh or run. Julian set down his bag. "This room is lovely," he said. "But it is clearly more ambitious than we are." She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Then he picked up the key card and walked straight back downstairs. Mara followed more slowly. At the desk, Julian leaned one elbow against the counter and smiled at the clerk. "We've known each other for approximately 23 hours, he said. "If you make us share a bed already, the pacing becomes unbelievable." The clerk's eyes widened, then he laughed. "Oh my God. I'm sorry. The booking system is apparently rooting for us," Julian said. Mara looked down, smiling despite herself. The clerk found two adjoining rooms with a locked connecting door. Julian used points and paid the difference without discussing it. 10 minutes later, Mara stood in her own room, suitcase at her feet, looking at the quiet lake through the window. Her phone rang. Andrew again. She held it in her hand for 3 rings before answering. "Mara," he said, relief rushing into his voice. "Thank God. Where are you?" She looked toward the connecting door between her room and Julian's. "I'm away," she said. "With who?" The question landed wrong. Does it matter? It matters if you're making decisions based on some stranger. Mara shut her eyes. "I'm not making a decision tonight. I just need you to come back on Monday. We can talk. We can fix this. You don't know that. I know us." She looked at her reflection in the dark window. For so long, she had wanted someone to know her that completely. Now she was not sure Andrew had ever known the part of her that wanted something different. "I'll be back Monday," she said. "But I'm not promising anything else." He went quiet. "Mara, I have to go." She ended the call before he could make the silence into another argument. When she opened her door, a glass of warm water sat on the floor outside. No note. No pressure. Across the hall, Julian's door was closed. She carried the glass inside and stood there for a long time. Later, she found him on the lakeside boardwalk in a dark coat, his hands in his pockets. He had brought her a paper cup of hot chocolate and offered it without asking whether she wanted it. She was wearing his wool coat over the black dress because she had not packed anything suitable for cold air. It hung too large around her shoulders, smelling faintly like cedar and rain. They sat on a wooden bench overlooking the lake. The water moved against the shore in slow, dark strokes. "He wants me to come home so we can talk," Mara said. Julian looked out at the lake. "Do you want to?" "I don't know." "That's allowed." She held the cup between both hands. "The worst part is that he isn't wrong about everything," she said. "We've been together a long time. We built a life. We have furniture. We have a favorite grocery store. His friends know what wine I like. His mother sends me recipes I never make." Julian nodded. And every time I try to picture going back, I feel like I can't breathe." The warmth of the cup pressed into her palms. Julian turned toward her. "Do you want to go back because you still want a life with him?" Mara could not answer. "Or," he said quietly, "do you want to go back because you're scared of disappointing someone who's used to you saying yes?" Her breath caught. The question did not feel like a demand. It felt like a hand held out in the dark. She stared at the lake until the blur in her eyes cleared. "What about you?" she asked. "Why were you leaving?" Julian smiled, but it did not reach all the way to his eyes. "I got offered a job in Los Angeles." "That sounds good." "It sounds impressive. And I'm tired of choosing things because they look like the next right move." He looked down at his hands. "I've spent a lot of my life being good at leaving. New cities. Better jobs. Bigger projects. I tell myself it's ambition, and sometimes it is. But lately..." He paused. "Lately I'm not sure I want to keep building a life I don't have time to live in." Mara looked at him differently then. Not as the composed man who had rescued her from a sidewalk, not as the clever neighbor who knew exactly what to say. As someone standing beside her in the same uncertainty. She set her hand on the bench between them. Her fingers touched the back of his. Julian did not close his hand around hers. He turned his palm upward and left it there. Mara looked at it for a long moment. Then she placed her hand in his. The contact was simple. Warm. Real. Neither of them spoke. By the time they reached Montreal 2 days later, Mara had slept in a different bed, worn clothes from a tourist shop, eaten maple pastries in the car, and learned that Julian sang badly when he thought no one was listening. He had learned that she hated bananas, loved old detective novels, and kept a black notebook in her bag where she wrote sentences she never showed anyone. They did not discuss what their hands had done on the lakeside bench. But neither of them forgot. On their third night in Montreal, they found a basement jazz bar in Old Montreal, down a narrow stairwell beneath a florist shop. The room was all exposed brick, low brass lights, and the slow ache of a stand-up bass. Mara sat across from Julian at a small round table near the stage, her notebook open beside her drink. "You write?" he asked. "Sometimes." "What kind of things?" "Things I would never show anyone." "That sounds inconveniently mysterious." "It's mostly bad. Most private things are." She gave him a look. A woman at the microphone announced that the band was taking a break and invited anyone in the room to read something, sing something, tell a story, embarrass themselves artistically. Her eyes landed on Mara's notebook. "You," she said, pointing. "You look like you have something." Mara's entire body went still. "No," she mouthed. The room laughed lightly, kindly, but Mara shook her head. Julian did not speak. The woman moved on. Mara looked down at her notebook, then at the stage. "I hate this," she said. "You don't have to do it." "I know. That's the important part. She pressed her lips together. Julian moved his glass aside, clearing space between her and the aisle. He did not touch her. He did not tell her she would be great. He only said, "You don't have to prove you can sing. You just have to decide whether you want to be heard." Mara looked at him. The bass player began tuning his instrument again. Something in her chest unlatched. She stood before she could change her mind. The walk to the stage felt impossibly long. Then she was under the lights, holding her notebook with both hands. Her voice shook on the first line. But she read anyway. She read about rainwater shining on black pavement. About a woman standing in a city she had lived in for years and realizing she had never once asked herself where she wanted to go. About the strange terror of being offered a door and discovering that no one was going to push her through it. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then people applauded. Not loudly at first. Then more. Mara looked toward Julian. He was sitting exactly where she had left him, one elbow on the table, watching her with an expression so steady and proud that it almost undid her. She came back to him with flushed cheeks and a breathless smile. "You knew I could do that." "I suspected. You didn't even clap first. I thought you'd hate that." She stared at him. Then she leaned down and kissed his cheek. It was quick. Barely there. But Julian went still. When she pulled back, he looked up at her. "Was that a thank you?" he asked. "Or are you trying to get us removed from the premises for violating the pacing agreement?" Mara smiled. "Maybe I'm starting to dislike that agreement." Her phone buzzed. The sight of Andrew's name cut through the warmth too sharply. She opened the message. It was long. He had thought about everything, he wrote. He understood she needed space. He wanted to start over. He would listen. He would change. She did not need to make choices alone. They could rebuild this together. Mara read it twice. Then a third time. Julian watched her face change. Outside, rain had started again. A fine silver rain against the dark stone streets. She stood abruptly. "I need air." Julian followed her out without asking. They stopped in a narrow alley beside the bar, beneath a yellow street lamp. Water dripped from the edge of an old brick wall. The music inside came through the door in softened bursts. Mara held out the phone. "He's not a bad person," she said. Julian read only enough to understand, then handed it back. "I know. He's not trying to hurt me. I know. He just..." She pressed both hands to her face, then lowered them. "He just always thinks love means making things easier for me. But the easier he makes them, the less I recognize my own life." Julian stood a few feet away. Close enough to matter. Far enough that she could step back. "At the party," she said, "he said we needed space. But he still expected me to come home, sign the lease, go to his mother's dinner, talk about Boston. He wanted space for me to become less difficult. That's what he meant." The rain darkened the shoulders of Julian's coat. Mara laughed once, bitterly. "And now he says I don't have to do this alone." Julian's voice was low. "Does that feel comforting?" "No." "Then you have your answer." She looked at him. "You say that like it's easy." "It isn't easy." "Then why do you make it sound easy?" Julian stepped closer, stopping before the distance disappeared. "Because you're finally saying what you want," he said. "And I think you deserve to hear yourself say it without someone immediately explaining why you shouldn't." Her throat tightened. She looked down at the phone in her hand. "I'm afraid I'll go back and forget all of this," she whispered. "I'm afraid you'll become this beautiful little break in the middle of my life, and then I'll wake up in our apartment and convince myself I imagined it." Julian's face changed. Not dramatically. But something guarded in him gave way. "Mara," he said, I need to tell you something before this goes any further. She looked up. I don't want to be that. The alley seemed to narrow around them. I don't want to be the man you kiss in another city because you're hurting, and then forget because it's easier to return to what you know. You wouldn't be. You don't know that yet. She took a step toward him. Julian did not move. I don't want to take advantage of the fact that you're lonely, he continued. Or angry. Or scared. I don't want to win because someone else made you feel small. You haven't. I know. But I want more than being the person who was kind to you when you needed kindness. The rain moved between them. I want you to choose me when you don't need rescuing, he said. Mara's breath caught. She had been waiting for him to make it easier. For him to say the right line, pull her close, turn this into a story where she escaped one man by falling into the arms of another. Instead, Julian stood in front of her and asked for something harder. Truth. She lifted her hand to his face. He did not lean into it until her fingers touched his cheek. I don't know what my life looks like after Monday, she said. But I know I don't want to go back to the way it was. Julian closed his eyes for 1 second beneath her palm. And I know, she added, that when I'm with you, I don't feel like I have to become easier to deserve the room I'm taking up. His eyes opened. Mara stepped closer. This time, when she kissed him, there was nothing accidental about it. His hand came to the back of her neck only after she had already chosen the distance. The kiss was slow, warm, and careful, like he was still asking permission even as she answered him. When they pulled apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he said softly, we go back to New York. Mara closed her eyes. And that doesn't mean, he continued, you go back to your old life. The lobby of their Brooklyn building looked exactly the same when they returned Sunday night. The brass-framed glass doors. The potted plant beside the mailboxes. The elevator numbers glowing red above the closed doors. But Mara was different when she walked through them. Andrew was waiting near the front desk. He held 2 coffees in one hand and a thin folder in the other. For a moment, Mara saw the life she had known, Andrew's navy coat, his tired face, the familiar concern in his eyes. The renewal documents. Her usual drink. The apartment upstairs with their books and dishes and the chair she had bought at a flea market that Andrew had always called impractical. Her hand tightened around the handle of her suitcase. Julian stood beside her, quiet. Andrew's eyes went to him first. Then back to Mara. I'm glad you're okay, he said. Mara nodded. I brought you coffee. I see. Andrew held out 1 cup. She did not take it. The smallest hurt crossed his face. I've been thinking about everything, he said. I know I handled Friday badly. I should never have made you feel like I was ending things in a hallway before a party. You did make me feel that. I know. He looked down. I'm sorry. The words were sincere. That made them harder. He lifted the folder slightly. I'm not saying we have to sign tonight. I just thought we could go upstairs and talk. We can figure this out. We can make different plans. Mara stared at the folder. Different plans, she said. Yes. But plans you already made. Andrew's jaw tightened. That's not fair. It is. He looked past her at Julian. So this is what this is about. Mara felt the old instinct rise in her, explain, soften, make sure no one thought badly of her. Before she could speak, Andrew said, you can't throw away 6 years because you had one impulsive weekend with someone you barely know. Julian's hand remained at his side. He did not move closer to Mara. He did not speak for her. Instead, he looked at her and asked quietly, do you want me to stay? The question changed everything. Not what should we do? Not you need me. Not let me handle this. Do you want me to stay? Mara looked at him. Rainwater still shone in his hair from the walk from the car. His face was calm, but she could see the tension beneath it. He would leave if she asked. He would give her the space to go upstairs. He would not make her choice for her. "I want you to stay," she said. Julian nodded once. Then he turned to Andrew. "I'm sure you want to fix this," he said evenly. "But you keep telling Mara what she should do next. You haven't asked her whether she wants to have this conversation tonight." Andrew's eyes hardened. "And who are you to tell me how to talk to my girlfriend?" Julian's gaze did not shift. "I'm the person she asked to stay." The lobby went very quiet. Andrew looked at Mara. She felt every old version of herself standing behind her, urging her to apologize for making this uncomfortable. Then Julian said, not to Andrew but to her, "You don't have to answer anyone on their schedule." Mara breathed in. "I'm not going upstairs," she said. Andrew's face changed. "Mara, I'm not signing the lease. Please don't do this in the lobby. You waited for me in the lobby. I waited because I love you. I know." His expression broke slightly at that. For a second, she almost reached for the coffee. Then she remembered the hallway outside Olivia's party. The way he had said, "Don't make this bigger than it is." She looked at the folder in his hand. "You do love me," she said. "But you love me best when I fit into the life you already planned. And I can't do that anymore." Andrew stared at her. "I'm willing to talk," she continued. "About moving out. About the apartment. About what comes next. But not tonight. Not because you're ready with the papers. Not because I'm afraid to disappoint you." His fingers tightened around the folder. "And him?" Andrew asked quietly. Mara looked at Julian. Then back at Andrew. "Him is not why I'm leaving," she said. "But he's the first person in a long time who made me remember I could choose something." Andrew stood there for a moment, coffee cooling in his hand. Then he nodded once. "Not agreement. Not forgiveness. Just the first movement of understanding." "I'll email you," he said. "Okay." He walked toward the doors. At the threshold, he stopped but did not turn around. "I hope you know what you're doing." Mara looked at the wet city beyond the glass. "No," she said. "But I know what I'm not doing anymore." Andrew left. The lobby seemed larger after he was gone. Mara stood still, hand trembling at her side. Julian did not rush toward her. He walked out to the car, opened the trunk, and lifted her suitcase free. When he came back inside, he placed it gently beside her. "Do you want to go upstairs," he asked, "or do you want to breathe for 5 minutes?" Mara looked at the elevator. Then at the street. Then at Julian. This time, she said, "I want to go somewhere I choose." At 3:45 in the morning, they sat in a corner booth at a diner in the East Village, one that had fluorescent lights instead of neon and windows fogged by the kitchen heat. Mara's suitcase rested beside the table. Julian's keys lay between 2 mugs of coffee. The city outside had begun to pale at the edges. Mara had sent Andrew one message from the diner. "I'll contact you this week about the apartment. I'm not changing my mind." Then she had turned her phone off. Across from her, Julian was reading an email on his laptop. "The Los Angeles job?" she asked. He looked up. "Yeah. And?" He closed the laptop. "And I said no." Her breath caught. "Because of me?" "No," he said immediately. Then he smiled. "Not only because of you." Mara waited. Julian leaned back against the booth. "Because I realized I've been treating every bigger opportunity like proof that my life is moving in the right direction. But I don't want to keep leaving places just because someone offers me a better view from another floor." She looked at him. "And because," he added, "I would like to see what happens if I stay." The waitress brought toast and eggs. Julian slid the plate toward Mara. "I'm paying," he said. "You owe me nothing. You paid for premium gas, hot chocolate, and an extremely expensive emotional breakthrough in Vermont. That last part was free." It did not feel free. She smiled. For a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. Then Mara set down her coffee. "Are you going to take me with you tomorrow?" she asked. Julian looked at her carefully. "To where?" "I don't know yet." "Good answer. I'm serious." "So am I." The city outside brightened by degrees. A bus passed the window. Somewhere down the block, a delivery truck groaned to a stop. Mara looked at the suitcase, then at Julian. "I don't want you to be one trip," she said. "I don't want to look back at this and think you were just the man who drove me away from something." Julian reached across the table. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and let his fingers rest there for one quiet second. "I wasn't there just because circumstances put me beside you," he said. "I'm here because I chose you." Her eyes filled. "I'm still figuring out who I am outside of all that," she whispered. "Then figure it out," he said. "I'm not asking you to become someone else for me either." She turned her face slightly into his hand. "Can you take me with you?" she asked again. Julian smiled. Then he leaned across the table and kissed her. It was not the uncertain kiss in a Montreal alley. It was not the soft brush of gratitude in a jazz bar. This kiss was warm and deliberate, shaped by every mile they had driven and every door she had chosen not to walk through. When they pulled apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "This time," he said, "we don't have to run." Outside, morning opened slowly over the city. Inside, Mara's suitcase waited beside the booth, Julian's keys lay between their coffee cups, and neither of them reached for either one too quickly.